Genshin Impact is a wondrous game with an ever-growing world, and stylish art design is able to capture the imagination of players. Whether you enjoy the world, story or gameplay, one aspect that will keep players coming back to the game are the amazing characters. So I'm Darcblade with a character guide to Zhongli in Genshin Impact. In this guide we will briefly cover the basic lore of the character, their moves, abilities, weapon options, stat priorities and artifact builds. Remember though that these guides are mainly aimed at free-to-play and low-spender players, so the guides will feature the characters as if they were mainly Constellation level 0 with 4-star weaponry. However, there may be 1 or 2 exceptions to this rule. Zhongli is a 5-star Geo character who wields a polearm. However, in order to obtain the character, you need to wish for him on specific limited time banners. Zhongli is the current vassal of the Geo Archon Morax, so he is an ancient being. In fact, he is one of the oldest beings in the whole of Teyvat, as he was a god well before the Seven even existed. He was also instrumental when it came to forming the world of Teyvat we see today, as he was a major player during the Archon Wars. It is interesting that often older beings in the world of Teyvat refer to Zhongli as Morax rather than Zhongli, as they know about his past and history. Thanks to his age and personality, he is very knowledgeable and has vast amounts of wisdom in almost all aspects of the world. But despite his divine status, Zhongli has retired his position as Archon and has returned to his former identity as simply an Adeptus, albeit still under the guise of a human. He currently works as a consultant for the Wengshan funeral parlor. But living among mortals, Zhongli is impressed with the people of Liyue, their ability to adapt, to change, their resilience, and that they no longer necessarily need to rely on the aid of the Seven. Regardless, Zhongli is a very humble man who holds a lot of respect for Liyue traditions. As the Geo Archon was responsible for creating and forming the land of Liyue, he is all about dealing with contracts. And he appears pleased to see that the people of Liyue still hold value when it comes to forming contracts in various aspects of life. But Zhongli is not infallible. In his former role as Geo Archon, he never had to worry about Mora. But now living among the humans, he often doesn't realise the value of Mora or when he's being scammed, which can lead to comic moments. But even after all this time, everything that Zhongli has been through and seen, he is still a kind and genuine being. With an air of nostalgia about him, he loves to reminisce on the past and teach people about the world. I would love to go into more details about the lore of Zhongli, but he is one of the most lore-rich characters in the entire game. So with that, we'll move on to talk about his moves and abilities. Now every character in Genshin Impact has access to various talents. These are divided into combat and passive talents. Combat talents are your moves and abilities that you use in combat, while passive talents are mechanics that work in the background of a character. When it comes to Zhongli, his first combat talent is Normal Attacks, Rain of Stone. When pressing the attack button, Zhongli will perform a 6-hit combo with his spear. This is a straightforward fast combo that can hit quite hard. Alternatively, you can hold the attack button to perform a charged attack. This will consume a small amount of stamina and cause Zhongli to teleport forward, causing stone spears to fall along the path of the teleportation. And then finally, he has access to a plunging attack, which is performed by pressing the attack button whilst in mid-air, causes Zhongli to plummet towards the ground, damaging opponents in an AoE around the impact zone. Which brings us on to the next combat talent, which is Zhongli's elemental skill known as Dominus Lapidus. Now this is quite a complex elemental skill and can work in many ways. You can either press and tap the elemental skill or hold it. Doing this will cause different effects to occur. So firstly, for simply pressing the elemental skill, this will cause Zhongli to draw the power of the Geo in the earth and cause a pillar of stone to erupt in front of him. This pillar is referred to as a stone stele. When created, this will cause AoE Geo damage to opponents around it. Additionally, this stone stele will then start to pulse and generate a Geo damage field around it. Any opponent nearby will take AoE Geo damage. The stone stele will also intermittently resonate with other nearby Geo constructs, causing those Geo constructs to also pulse and resonate Geo damage. So the constructs set up by, say, the Geo Traveller, if they are close enough to Zhongli's stone stele, both the stele and the Traveller's Geo construct will both pulse, dealing Geo damage to opponents nearby. Additionally, the stone stele will persist on the field even if Zhongli isn't the active character. The stone stele itself is considered a Geo construct, so it can be climbed and used to block attacks, so that's something to be aware of. Finally, unless you have Constellations, only one stone stele can be created at any one time by Zhongli. But there is a secondary function to the Dominus Lapidus. which is when you hold down the elemental skill. Firstly, if a stone steely isn't already active on the field, this will simply create one. But on top of that, it will also create a shield of jade around the active character. Creating this shield will also cause AoE geo damage to nearby foes, and on top of that, if there are enemies with the geo element nearby when performing this, it will drain a large amount of geo elements from a maximum of 2 such targets. However, this effect, when draining from geo opponents, does not cause damage, unfortunately. Now, the Jade shield itself is a damage absorption shield that scales off of Zhongli's maximum HP. By default, it possesses 150% damage absorption against all elemental and physical damage, and characters protected by the Jade shield will decrease the elemental resistance and physical resistance of opponents in a small AoE by 20%. Unfortunately, this effect cannot be stacked, but regardless, this Jade shield is incredibly powerful at not only protecting the active characters, but also debuffing opponents. This shield can of course be made even stronger by stacking HP on Zhongli, and currently at the time of this video is considered the strongest shield in the game. In all honesty, having this shield active with a Zhongli that is built around HP, it makes survival rarely an issue, even when taking on the toughest of challenges. Please note that when it comes to Zhongli's elemental skill, should you simply tap it, then you won't incur as long a cooldown as if you were to hold it. Finally, when it comes to his elemental skill, when you hold down the elemental skill and there are mining nodes in the world around you, they will be instantly destroyed, allowing Zhongli to be the quickest and best miner in the game. Which brings us on to the final combat talent, which is his elemental burst known as the Planet Before. When activating Zhongli's elemental burst, he will summon forth a meteor from the skies down to earth, dealing massive AoE geo damage to opponents caught in its radius. This will also apply a petrification status to these opponents' hit. Now, the geo damage itself is incredibly high, so it's straightforward in that sense, but it also has some crowd control elements to it, thanks to the fact that you petrify opponents, so they're pretty much turned to stone. They won't be able to move for a few seconds after being hit by the elemental burst, if they're not already dead. So those are all the combat talents available to Zhongli. Let's move on to talk about his passive talents. First of all is Resonant Waves. When the Jade Shield, on whatever the active character is, takes damage, it will become fortified. Fortified characters then have 5% increase to their shield strength, which can stack up to 5 times and lasts until the Jade Shield disappears, giving your entire team even more protection, and also means that unless you're taking on the hardest content in the game, rarely will enemies be able to destroy the Jade Shield. It will simply fade out instead, and you'll have to refresh it manually. The next passive talent is Dominance of Earth. Basically, Zhongli will deal bonus damage based on his maximum HP. His normal, charged attacks and plunging attacks will increase by 1.39% of his maximum HP. His elemental skill, the Dominus Lapidus, Stone Steely Resonance, and hold damage will be increased by 1.9% of his maximum HP, and his elemental burst, the Planet Before, will have its damage increased by a whopping 33% of his maximum HP. So obviously his elemental burst benefits the most out of this, but as his maximum HP also strengthens the Jade Shield, is another reason to go for HP on the Geo Archon. And then finally, the last passive is Arcanum of Crystal. When Zhongli is used to forge a polearm at the blacksmith, he will refund 15% of the ore used when crafted. So a nice little bonus when it comes to crafting polearms in the game. Now, let's quickly move on to go over the constellations for Zhongli. Like I said, these guys are mainly aimed at free-to-play and low-spender players, but nonetheless, let's quickly briefly talk about the constellations for Zhongli if you're lucky enough to get them. When it comes to Zhongli, pretty much all the constellations are good, namely Constellation 1, 2, 4 and 6. Constellation level 1, Rock, the Backbone of Earth, allows you to create 2 Stone Steely Earth pillars instead of just 1, which is a very nice constellation to get. Constellation level 2, Stone, the Cradle of Jade, causes your elemental burst, the Planet Before, to create Jade shields on your party when it descends and hits opponents. Constellation level 4, Topaz, Unbreakable and Fearless, increases the elemental burst AoE by 20% and also increases the duration of the petrification effect by 2 seconds. And then finally, and probably the most standout of the constellations, is Constellation level 6, Chrysos, Bounty of Dominator. When the Jade Shield takes damage, 40% of that incoming damage will be converted into health for the current active character, but a single instance of this regeneration cannot exceed 8% of that character's maximum HP. Regardless, This gives Zhongli the potential to heal his allies with his Jade Shield, potentially eliminating the need for having a healer on your party. But those are all the constellations for Zhongli. Let's move on to the next section of the video where we talk about the builds that I like to use for him. Now Zhongli is a character that can be built in many ways, however there are two builds that stand out the most for me personally. The first build I refer to as the shield build. This build is all about increasing Zhongli's shield potential as well as provide support to a team. He'll also be able to do a little bit of extra damage thanks to the fact that this build will be mainly focusing on HP. So first of all, when it comes to the weapons, obviously 5-star weaponry is going to be the absolute best for Zhongli, but for this shield build I am going to recommend going for the 3-star weapon, the Black Tassel. Whilst the base attack on this weapon is not exactly the best, we are taking this for that massive HP increase. We'll also gain the Bane of the Soft bonus, which increases damage against slimes, but it's not that useful. We are mainly taking this as a stat stick to boost our shield and the damage of our abilities. If you wanted to be a little bit more offensive and make use of Zhongli's elemental burst a little bit more, you could take energy recharge weapons such as the Catch, which will give us energy recharge as well as increase the elemental burst damage and elemental burst crit rate. The choice is up to you. But when it comes to the artifacts, there are two options here. Firstly, you'll either want to go for 4 pieces of the Tenacity of the Melolith or 2 pieces of the Tenacity of the Melolith set combined with 2 pieces of the Retracing Blade set. Personally, I go with 4 pieces of the Tenacity of the Melolith set, which for wearing 2 pieces, our HP will be increased by 20%, and when our elemental skill hits an opponent, the attack of all nearby party members is increased by 20%, and their shield strength is increased by 30% for 3 seconds. This may seem like quite a small amount of time, but because Zhongli's elemental skill pulses and damages opponents periodically, this buff can remain active so long as there are enemies nearby. This effect can be triggered once every 0.5 seconds and can be triggered even if the character who owns this artifact set isn't on the field. So it's a perfect set built for Zhongli. Like I said, you could also take 2 pieces of the Retracing Blade set, which would increase the shield strength by 35%, but it means you lose the support bonus of that extra 20% attack to your party. But the choice is always up to you. Now, when it comes to the stats, it's all about HP. So, when it comes to your Sands, you want to go for HP. When it comes to your Goblet, you want to go for HP. Although you can also consider Geo damage as well if you want a little bit of extra damage with your Elemental Skill and Elemental Burst. And then finally, for your Circlet, you want to go for HP again. As for the substats, HP percentage is king, followed by flat HP, and then go for energy recharge, crit rate, or crit damage. These stats will make your Jade Shield incredibly strong, and on top of that, all of your combat talents will be increased thanks to having massive amounts of HP. Now, when it comes to the talent priority for this build, I'd recommend going for Dominus Lapidus first, your elemental skill, followed by Planet Before, your elemental burst, and then finally your normal attacks. This gives you a very strong defensive build that increases the survivability of our entire party, making most content in Genshin Impact a lot more simple as you don't have to worry about survivability. Also, thanks to the high HP and using the Tenacity of the Melolith set, Zhongli's damage will be increased, and on top of that will also increase the damage of our allies as well, making this my favourite build to use on the Geo Archon. Which brings us on to the next build, which is the Elemental Burst DPS build. This build leans more towards Zhongli dealing massive amounts of damage with his Elemental Burst combined with survival aspects. So when it comes to the weaponry, we're going to go with more offensive options here, so I'd recommend either taking Deathmatch or the Black Cliff Pole. Deathmatch will give us a crit rate increase, and on top of that, it will give us the Gladiator bonus, which if there are opponents on the field, if there are 2 or more, it will increase our attack and defense. But if there are fewer than 2, it will simply increase our attack. Whilst Black Cliff Pole on the other hand increases our critical damage and gives us the Press the Advantage buff, which after defeating an opponent will give us increased attack for a small duration. Failing that, the Catch is also a great option, although failing that you can also consider other energy recharge polearms such as the Favonius Lance or Prototype Star Glitter if we want to simply increase how often we can use our Elemental Burst. Now, when it comes to the artifacts, we're going for a mixed set here, going for 2 pieces of the Noblesse Oblige set combined with 2 pieces of the Archaic Petra set. 2 pieces of the Noblesse Oblige set will increase our elemental burst damage by 20%, and 2 pieces of the Archaic Petra set will give us a geo damage bonus of 15%. Both these have been taken strictly to increase the damage of our elemental burst. As for the stats, when it comes to your sands, you'll either want to go for HP percentage or attack percentage, or you could even go for energy recharge. When it comes to your goblet, you'll want to go for geo damage, and for your circlet, you'll either want to go for crit rate or crit damage. As for the substats num, you'll mainly want to go for crit rate and crit damage, followed by a combination of either HP percentage or attack percentage, and then energy recharge. As for the combat talents, you'll want to go for planet before first, your elemental burst, followed by Dominus Lapidus, your elemental skill, and then your normal attacks. Building Zhongli this way will give you a character that can often see 6-figure digits when it comes to using their elemental burst if used right and when used in the correct team. Now of course there are other builds for Zhongli out there. These are just the 2 builds that I personally like to use. Other builds out there include a physical Zhongli build, which makes use of his normal attacks more than anything else, but personally I feel there are better physical damage dealers out there. It also means that you don't utilize his strongest features in his elemental skill and elemental burst as much. So I'd strongly recommend going for one of the first 2 builds featured in this video. But every character in Genshin Impact comes with various pros and cons. No character is absolutely perfect. However, Zhongli could be close to it. Anyway, when it comes to the Geo Archon, his biggest pro is his survivability, thanks to the Jade Shield, and the fact that he stacks HP when it comes to his builds means that he can survive even the toughest encounters quite easily in Genshin Impact. But be aware that the shield won't work against the corrosion debuff unless you have Constellation level 6. Regardless though, his shield is one of the strongest in the game, allowing you to take on pretty much anything the game has to offer. The next pro is the damage when it comes to his elemental burst. His elemental burst can hit incredibly hard and can still sting even if you're not focused on DPS. This is thanks to, of course, the fact that his elemental burst benefits from his maximum HP. So even if Zhongli is using a support or shield focused build, you can still deal some damage. Of course, if you spec into damage based stats, the damage is even more deadly when you bring down the Geo Meteor. And then finally, the last pro for Zhongli is he's amazing when it comes to traversing the world. This is mainly because of his elemental skill, which can be used as a geo construct to climb to hard to reach places. But on top of that, when holding down his elemental skill, it will detonate all mining nodes around him, allowing you to easily collect them. But of course, every character out there has cons. The 2 biggest cons for Zhongli is, unfortunately, his petrification effect tied to his elemental burst is a little bit on the short side. It's still useful and can be great for interrupting opponents when they're performing certain attacks, but I wish it would last a little bit longer. And the other con is, unfortunately, the Stone Steely, created from your elemental skill, can unfortunately be destroyed quite easily by certain opponents. But regardless, Zhongli's pros far outweigh his cons. I could even add more pros for this character in all honesty. So if you're able to get your hands on the Geo Archon, you've got a character that I cannot say enough positive things about. But every character in Genshin Impact is made stronger when used in the right team. When it comes to Zhongli, there are many options available to him. He can work alongside pretty much anyone, but there's a few that I would like to cover here. Firstly, Zhongli works really well when used with characters who can create other geo constructs. The Geo Traveler, Ningguang, Arataki Ito, or Albedo. Their geo constructs will all pulse and resonate with Zhongli's Stone Steely, allowing you to create a field of constant geo damage. Zhongli is also great when it comes to using characters who could be considered berserk characters, characters who are high risk, high reward characters, such as Hu Tao or Zhao. This is thanks to his shield being able to protect the characters who normally risk losing their HP or having low HP to deal optimal damage. But like I said, Zhongli can pretty much fit into any team in the game. He can enhance any team's survivability and more. So overall, Zhongli is probably one of the best characters in Genshin Impact currently. And he's a little bit of a jack of all trades, but excels at doing everything. He is great when it comes to survivability. He can deal damage when he wants to if you spec him in the correct way. And I could keep this video going on and on praising the Geo Archon. If you're lucky enough to get Zhongli, you're going to have one of the best characters in the game in your hands that can be used in so many ways and make Genshin Impact a more enjoyable and safer experience. So there we have it, that is my character guide and overview to Zhongli in Genshin Impact. Now remember, there are multiple ways to play the characters and use them in the game, which is one of the many aspects that makes Genshin Impact so enjoyable for me. So at the end of the day, use the characters how you want to use them. These builds are how I personally like to use the characters, and I hope they help you out in your adventures. So until next time, I've been Darcblade, bringing you a character guide to Zhongli in Genshin Impact. Hope you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.